On behalf of our Chief Minister, Thiru M.K. Stalin, I'm happy to be a part of this vital expression of protest against the unfair, unjust, immoral, and ultimately self-destructive deprivation of funds from opposition states at historically unprecedented levels through hitherto unimaginable means. In his DO letter to the Honorable Chief Minister of Kerala, our Chief Minister pointed out 3 or 4 extreme examples. The first is the use of Article 293, subsection B of the Constitution, for the Finance Ministry of the Union Government of India to override the legislative powers of the states who have their own equivalents to the FRBM Acts and are empowered under the Constitution to set their own borrowing limits. However, unelected members of the Finance Ministry of the Union Government override the legislative powers of the state and set borrowing limits using the back door of 293B. Going further, they use unfairly low estimates of the GSDP of our state and therefore set a limit as 3% or 3.5% of a much lower GSDP than those actually realized. Further, they force us to take any debts incurred in the public sector undertakings like the electricity board onto our state financing limit. And finally, he pointed out that schemes like the Chennai Metro, where the Government of India should have infused its share of equity and therefore removed those borrowings from our borrowing limit, they have refused to do so for many years and forced those borrowings onto our balance sheet and therefore affect our overall borrowing capacity. The Chief Minister has already pointed out the many ways in which we are deprived of our share of funding, primarily starting with the excessive use of surcharges and cesses, where the Government of India does not share those revenues with the states and instead, at its own discretion, in its own schemes, decides how those should be distributed. At one time, Tamil Nadu used to get about 70% of its revenues from the Union as share of taxes and 30% under central schemes. Right now, we get less than half our revenues from share of taxes and the other half from central schemes. And those schemes are grossly biased against states like Tamil Nadu. Whenever we ask for any support, there is always a response of silence. When we ask for our airports to be declared international airports, they don't do it, and they open airports in BJP states. When we ask for AIMS or NIPER to be funded as announced in the union budget, they don't do it and leave them as mere announcements. When we ask for relief from historic floods, they don't allocate 1 rupee and show no compassion at all. In fact, if you look at the way they fund the schemes, as the Honorable Chief Minister pointed out, when they start at 80-20 union to state. In 2 years, it's 20-80, 20% their money, 80% our money. Yet, we are told we have to brand them as union schemes, we have to use the Prime Minister's name, we have to use the Prime Minister's image, otherwise we will not even get that 20% of the funding. With the way that we are going towards direct benefit transfers, it will not be too long before most people will not see the image of Mahatma Gandhi on the rupee notes and instead will only be required to see the image of the Prime Minister on the identity of the scheme. These kinds of biases have been aggravated and exacerbated by the nature of GST. Many say that it is an example of federalism. I'll say the good news. The Union Finance Minister, whenever she chairs these meetings, is unfailingly courteous and allows everybody to speak. But that's about as far as federalism goes. The Union government gets to decide the agenda, it gets to decide the composition of group of ministers, it gets to nominate the chairman, it gets to have every control over the mechanism, and by design has 30% voting rights in a place where you need to have 75% voting to pass any resolution. It can deny any resolution it likes, and for the states to pass any resolution against this union's interest, you will have to get at least 15 or so states lined up to go against the union. This is not federalism. If we say, so you cut our actual allocations, you cut our funds, let us at least go and borrow them from the market. They reduce our borrowing capacity in every way possible. They cut our GDP from their own CSO's estimate to some artificial level, force us to take some percentage on that, 3.25%, 3.5%, while they, in a shameless sign of hypocrisy, consider it a brilliant outcome if their fiscal deficit is 5 or 5.5 or 6%, but hold us to limits like 3 or 3.25 or 3.5. So they will not give us money and they will not let us borrow. What are the other channels available for us? We want to get foreign direct investment. What do? They deny us permission to go overseas to seek investment. The Foreign Affairs Ministry routinely rejects applications from state ministers to travel overseas. They retard or delay inbound missions who come to meet us. They divert investments to their preferred states and to gift city. They restrict the World Bank or ADB from funding more than one project in one state in a year. And they delay or stall FIPB approval and cabinet approval. In every way possible, they want to constrain our fiscal flexibility and our ability to service our people's needs. And yet, we have to continue this fight. In fact,